one thing that's been challenging for me as your partner is that, people will say that they've Googled about the COVID vaccine and they've made their decisions based on like some Googling that they've done for, some extreme Googling. And at the same time, you've had like almost 30 years or more than that since you started getting into chemistry in high school and biochemistry and things like that, organic chemistry and how can you compare someone who has dedicated their entire life to understanding the way that our body works from so many different ways, to someone that's just Googled for 3 months? Like, it still just doesn't.
Or less. And one of the things that we'll come back to probably again and again is this piece about expertise. And look, I'm not going to say that experts are infallible. They definitely aren't. As a matter of fact, there's a whole thing called Nobel laureate disease. When people get Nobel prizes, they tend to go off the rails and get really wonky. That's a whole thing in and of itself. And it's very hard for people to recognize unless they have a strong background, a strong foundation in the relevant sciences. It's very hard for people to understand what's accurate and what's not. A lot of times common sense doesn't work. It's kind of like, you're an expert at your life, you're an expert at the things that you're used to, and let's say you're an expert at ice hockey. That doesn't mean that you understand basketball. It's different. It's different. And if you apply the rules of ice hockey to basketball, you're not going to get very many baskets. You're not going to score terribly well because you're playing by the rules of the wrong game. And this is a complicated game. The immune system is roughly equivalent in its complexity to all of the connections in your brain. They're complicated in different ways.
I think another thing that you've mentioned is the way that I had no idea about, because I was a cultural anthropology major, but going through college and getting through certain classes and then being told, okay, now forget all of that. And then okay, now we're going to go into the next class and now you have to learn something completely different. And if you had stopped, if someone stops with that first class, then they're going to be thinking that that's the way that things are. Mm-hmm. But then the next class, I don't know what the names of the classes are, but...
Well, this happens a lot in the sciences. And chemistry is by far the worst culprit here, because if you go into intro chemistry, your first quarter, they'll tell you this is what an atom is like, this is what the bonds are like in between different atoms, and then you literally get to the next class and it's like, all of that is completely false. Here's the way it really is. And then you get to the next one and all of that is completely false. This is the way it really is. Other subjects are not quite as bad. Physics is actually one of the ones that's the most upfront about it, because they make it clear, we're going to make this assumption. We're going to assume that the cow is the shape of a bowling ball and that there's no air resistance. And it's utterly ridiculous. But chemistry is already abstract, and you have to make, again, the map is not the territory. You have to make a model of it to wrap your head around it and try and understand it. And you understand it at one level, the 1 inch per mile level, but then you go down another level and all of that stuff breaks down. You realize it was just an overview, and you have to learn it at a different level. And then you go down another one, and all of that, everything that you knew, that model breaks down, and you have to go to a different level. And that happens very much also with immunology, but in a different sense. It's not so much scale, it's location gets stripped out, time gets stripped out, and order of operations, order of how things happen gets stripped out. And those are critically important. They're absolutely critically important, because the difference between getting inflammation and having something foreign show up in your body in one order versus the other is the difference between leaving your body wide open for an infection or having a massive immune response. They do opposite things with opposite order. And so the order is as critical as what happens.